Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we're discussing another Sharks player review. And for those of you keeping track, there are only 2 players left to be reviewed this season, and both of them happen to be the goaltenders for the San Jose Sharks from this past season, which isn't really that much of a surprise considering just how bad the Sharks' goaltending was this year. It's one of the main reasons why the Sharks were so bad themselves this past season. And so it was a goaltending tandem of James Reimer and Kaapo Kähkönen trying to do a 1A, 1B type of situation, but with how both of these players played, it ended up being more of like a 2A, 2B type of situation where they were backup level at best and likely even worse than that. And it is James Reimer, in my opinion, who just barely edges out Kaapo Kähkönen in terms of performance, but that is pretty much like splitting hairs, I would say, and neither of these two goaltenders were in any way good at all. And while there are of course other reasons for why the Sharks goaltending may not have had any success this season, for instance, the Sharks defense in front of them was rather unremarkable, and of course there was Erik Karlsson, who would frequently forego his defensive efforts in exchange for offensive opportunities, but at the end of the day the goaltending just was not good enough. And so that starts here with James Reimer, who had a history with the San Jose Sharks, considering this is the second year of a 2-year deal. He played all of 21-22 with San Jose, but he also had a brief history with them all the way back in 2016, the year that the San Jose Sharks made it to the Stanley Cup Finals. They acquired James Reimer in a trade from the Toronto Maple Leafs to help support Martin Jones and give him a more secure safety net just in case. He played a few games to round out the rest of the regular season, played exceptionally well, but his services were not really required in the playoffs, and the Sharks rode with Martin Jones throughout. And then of course Reimer would leave in free agency, so he would make his return and the Sharks would have some familiarity with him for the 21-22 season. And Reimer actually looked pretty good, had some solid stats, especially on a non-playoff team, and so it seemed as though moving up to the trade deadline that the Sharks could trade Reimer to get some value for him, since of course the Sharks were not going to make the playoffs that year. But that didn't end up happening, which brought us to the draft day with an entirely new management core. Now it was Mike Greer, who had just very recently taken over at that point. He had yet another opportunity to move on from James Reimer. Now with just 1 year remaining on his contract, any team that was looking for some goaltending help could pick up the veteran presence that was Reimer, whose most recent performances were solid even on a bad team. But once again, the Sharks, whether that is for a lack of offers or just for perhaps greed, the Sharks kept Reimer on for the season, and it went completely downhill. Taking a look at his statistics, 41 games started with just 12 wins. That is very bad, obviously, with a 3.48 goals against average. That is amongst the worst in the entire league out of goaltenders who played a reasonable amount of games, and is just compared to his 2.90 from last season, which wasn't fantastic, but still decent enough. This is just really, really bad. And so at this trade deadline, the Sharks no longer had the opportunity to recoup any value from James Reimer, even though they likely should have and would have. Instead, they probably would have had to pay a team to take Reimer off of their hands. Now, what exactly was the major issue with James Reimer this past season? Well, actually take a look at these next couple of stats. Now, it should be noted that these are not objective stats like the other ones previously, because they are based on a particular model that is more subjective than it is objective. So when it comes to his low danger save percentage and his high danger save percentage, if you look up these particular statistics, you might find slightly different numbers from multiple different sources. However, it does do a decent enough job of telling the story of James Reimer this season. So let us start off with his low danger save percentage of .958. Now, when it comes to low danger, this means those shots that come from the point that are unscreened, things of this nature, the ones where if they go in, you think, well, the goaltender absolutely should have had that. Last season, James Reimer had about a .971, which was good for 24th, I believe, in the league, which is actually in the upper half. Certainly not too bad. Most really good goaltenders should be able to sustain around a .975, with really good goaltenders like Allmark this season for the Boston Bruins hitting up at .981. This season, Reimer dropped from that .971 to a .958, which put him 46th out of 52 goaltenders in terms of low danger chances. And the eye test tracks exactly with this case. It was very often that Reimer would have a game where he lets in 3, 4, 5 goals And at least one of them was a goal that you would say, well, Reimer absolutely should have had that. It was very, very frequent where Reimer would have these moments in games where he would let in a very, very easy chance. And when you're giving up one extra goal per game that you really shouldn't be, it is no wonder that your team is losing more often than not. Because that's what's quite crazy. When you take a look at his high danger save percentage, things didn't really shift all that much from last season. He's always been pretty decent at saving those difficult opportunities, but it is the low danger and also the unlisted medium danger chances, which remained quite bad from where they were last season, that really did Reimer in. And so it is a sort of notion that if he can clean that up, he can be better, because those high danger opportunities he is solid with, but it just clearly shows that his mind was not on the game consistently enough this season, where he just let in a lot of these really, really bad goals. And so all of these save percentages combined, we eventually get to a all-around save percentage, which is an objective stat of 0.890, which is once again very, very bad, and is a significant drop from where he was last season, because last season I mentioned his 2.90 goals against average, which obviously isn't very good, but it is made better by the fact that his save percentage was I believe 0.911, which for a team basically shows that the Reimer was facing a lot of shots, which means he was letting up a decent amount of goals, but he was also making a lot of saves. This season, both of these stats combined basically show that he was facing a lot of shots because, again, of the unremarkable defense in front of him, but he was also letting in a lot of those shots, including, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of those low danger opportunities. So it was generally a very bad season for James Reimer. And so if we take a look at last year, the Sharks, like I mentioned, multiple opportunities to move on from Reimer. I ended up giving him the grade of an A- because he did just about as well as you could expect from a veteran goaltender on a pretty bad team. But this season, James Reimer did just about as bad as you could do for a veteran goaltender on a very bad team, and as such, I give him the grade of a D-. Class dismissed.